Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that we present this discussion, a very topical moment in history that we want to really kind of give some voices, a spotlight to shine. The Wizard World Brands wants to let our fans, family, and friends and collaborators know that we stand with the Asian community at this time. And it is our great, great pleasure to bring to you this conversation hosted by Immortal Studios, which has changed the game when it comes to Asian voices being in pop culture. Joining us today and leading this piece, we have CEO of Immortal Studios, Mr. Peter Shiao. Peter, take it away, please.
Thank you, Victor. I think this is one of our regular moments to spend with all of you, the fan community. And before we get into this conversation, I just want to thank Wizard World and really acknowledge them, this amazing platform, during this moment when we're really focused on the plight of Asians living in America, living in North America, the plight of Asians throughout the world, and how this community is reflected through popular culture back to everybody, and popular culture, diversity, and anti-Asian violence. Maybe you're coming into it for the first time. Whatever it is, I also want to thank you for joining us today, for trying to understand, for reaching out. This is an incredibly important conversation because we have, in this past month, we've all been through a lot. I think we've all had our hearts broken many, many different times. We've had a mixture of different emotions and feelings. We know, I think for the most part, I think almost everybody of goodwill, we know we're against hate. In our waking moments, we know that we're not for hurting people. We're not for excluding people. But yet it happens. And it goes all around, and sometimes we feel so powerless. So just one of the things that we believe in, and that the reason we wanted to pull this really extraordinary group together, and why we wanted to frame it around not anti-Asian violence, but what can we really do? I believe, and I think we all believe on this panel, that popular culture in a media-driven world where what you see on screens everywhere defines our reality, popular culture has such a huge part to play in defining how we think and believe about things before we even have a chance to critically own them or disown them. So in a popular culture-driven world that is sadly without Asian representation, or very minimal representation, or sporadic, sometimes disrespectful, neglectful representation leads to real life consequences. You know, I just kind of start this session with talking about an experience I had yesterday. I was in the middle of a photo shoot with a very well-known photographer. We were doing the executive shots, and we had a little crew, and you know, I was the person being shot, so they were in my office. We were shooting around and we're talking, and then I noticed that one of the gaffers, this young white man who was, you know, lighting and helping out. He was very interested in the things that we were doing because we were shooting some things with, you know, some Asian notions. He came to me and he meekly asked me, "Oh, so where are you from originally?" So my photographer's assistant comes to my office here in LA and he asked me where I'm originally from. You know, it's like when you get asked that by somebody, your natural reaction is like, "Excuse me, I've been here. This is my home." And to do this from somebody who's working for me in my own office was just kind of jarring. And I looked at him and I said, "You know what? This guy doesn't know." So I said, "You know what? I'm going to tell you right now. So yes, I am Chinese American. My ancestors come from China, but I've been here and this is my home." He was really perplexed. And then later on, as our work evolved, and you know, 4 hours later, we developed a rapport. And then I dragged him aside and I sat him down. I said, "Dude, where are you really from?" He said, "I'm from Atlanta." So we just had a little moment in a conversation there. So things like that happen. And this is for those of you listening, people, a lot of us have to deal with questions like that. Being in our homes, being in our workplaces, and encountering this kind of reaction from people. And when you get spoken to in that way, it's annoying. It's also very hurtful, and it's also reinforced. But and I can't help but to think about our conversation today, because when our experiences, even though we're just 6% of the North American population, we're 60% of the world. When you think that the global lens that reflects global reality does not reflect this reality back to its own population, it's not just a moral issue. It's not just a personal issue for those of us who are in that small minority. I think it's got to have really, really global consequences. So just kind of opening it up with my own little personal observation. So I'm just so excited to have this extraordinary group of people who are both in front of the screen and behind the screens. You're acting, you're directing, you're producing, you're singing, you're writing, you're creating. How does this topic hit you right now? How are you feeling this moment, Osric? People know you by the extraordinary things that you've done, your perennial presence. I think Supernatural comes to mind. You've had a chance to be in a lot of things. How are you feeling this moment right now? Do you have any personal experience, personal stories you want to share?
Yeah, I had something that came up. I was telling you guys I was directing my first short film. I just finished. We're in post-production. And there was this brief moment when I was writing it that because I originally wrote it for me to act in. And when I came around to the decision that I would direct it, there was like maybe a 20-minute period that I just caught myself thinking like, okay, well, if I'm not acting in it, then who would act in my place? And I just caught myself going to the default casting of like, all right, who are my white actor friends that I knew in town, right? And it was like such a weird thought. I'm like, okay, now that I'm not acting it, it just goes to the default white casting. And this is me, who is a massive like supporter of the community. I'm a huge advocate for Asian representation, and that's still my default. That is ingrained in me from like 30 years of plus of media here, right? And so it took me a second. I'm like, whoa, that was a weird thought that I had. And then of course, I'm like, I know like all of my best friends are Asian actors, right? So I should just use one of them. But it was just a weird thought that caught me off guard, because I thought I was kind of past that point of even like going into it. But I think it's important to have these types of conversations, because like, yeah, pop culture, and that does a lot for all of us. All of our biases, the ones that we're conscious of, the ones that are in our subconscious, like we know. So I think now that we're part of the topic of conversation, I think we got to keep it going. I think it's up to us to have these slightly uncomfortable conversations with people who aren't used to having them, because otherwise we just kind of blend into the background like we always have. And I think now's the time to stop that.
I think you raise a really good point, and that's just to be introspective as well, right? It's not just constant projection. This is this or that. Just like, how am I thinking? What am I bringing to this conversation? And what are my thoughts, and bring it in the light of day. Ludi, you're hitting a major stride in your career. There's so many. One of the major complaints in the community out there is that we're not seen, and I know that we've done some conversations around the role of Asian men. You're having this moment where you're about to be a lot more visible than you've already been. What are you bringing? When you hear about what's gone down over this past 4 or 5 months, this past year, like, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling vulnerable. Over the recent months, I've had encounters myself, and of course it culminated in the very recent massacre that happened. And I think I went through the same stages of grief, like anyone else grieving for someone that they can really relate to, they can empathize with, or even love. Went through the shock, went through the denial, went through the anger, went through the acceptance, and then saw some hope. And also, I didn't really understand why at the time, but I felt guilty.
Why?
I felt guilty because I thought, there's this term in Chinese called Shiao, Xiaoshen. It doesn't directly translate into anything in English. And I try to explain to people that weren't raised in Eastern culture at work that when you grow up in a Chinese family, you can pretty much stay home until you get married and your parents wouldn't kick you out, right? And their money is your money. And that comes from this word xiao. And it means piety, it means respect for your elders, it means taking responsibility for them, just like they took responsibility for you. So that's why I felt guilty, because when I saw people picking on our elders, people injuring, killing women, I felt like I didn't own up to my responsibility. And I think that's an important thing. When we're talking about masculinity, I think responsibility is an important thing. And I think taking ownership for who we are. And for Asian Americans and Asian Canadians, this is our country. And that's also taking our ownership, proper ownership for our rightful place in this country, knowing that we belong here. We're not here to fit in. In fact, I think that's the opposite of belonging. We're not here to be fit in a box. We're here to belong to our country, and we're here to own it. Just like anyone else who is American, who is Canadian, has the right to. So in that, I felt like the guilt actually translates. I think I was confused. I think it was the lack of responsibility, having the sense that I somewhere along the lines, I didn't step up and fully own my responsibility as an Asian, as a person to speak out about our culture. And so all that pain and sadness I felt inside of me, now I feel it's like it's our responsibility to actually transform the pain and fear into something else before transmitting it. Because I think fear, if you don't transform it, it's going to be transmitted as fear. So using our platform, using us as people in the public and motivators, inspirers, and leaders, we should be transforming, using creativity to transform the fear and the pain into something more positive, into hope, before passing it on. And we're here to not just stop Asian hate, but also to show Asian love.
Well said, Bob. Hold your thought there, Ludi. We're going to come back to you. What's the next step? Like, how does that love get expressed? Megan.
Honestly, I feel like it all comes down to, I don't know how I'm going to follow after that. That was so well said.
Just be yourself.
But yeah, I felt a lot of things. I felt very confused. I felt, also I felt like I had a sense of like accountability to have, because growing up Asian, we were always taught to be very polite, and it kind of came with the price of being overly passive. And I just remember just allowing racist jokes, just straight to my face, being told straight to my face up until even recently. To spread Asian love, honestly, I think it's just to listen. Listen to, be more open-minded, listen to your Asian friends, peers, go reach out to people. If you don't have any Asian American, Asian Canadian, Asian people around in your life, in your community, reach out to people online. Like, we have the internet for a reason. I think it's really important to show support to Asian businesses and Asian creators. There's so many creators out there that feel like they don't have a place in the entertainment space at all, because we were just not given many opportunities, and we kind of had to, like, we had our pioneers to make that way, to pave that way for young people like me to show and express ourselves and share these. And so I think those are definitely ways to show love to our community, to listen, to befriend, and just honestly just be open-minded, because I feel like that's where it all just starts. Hate comes from not only ignorance, but also arrogance, and just like not having the willingness to listen.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we go to our OG, our journeyman creative leader who's in front of the screen, behind the screens, you know, all over. You've I think in this conversation and the kind of foundational building that we're talking about, you've been there for a long time, and first as probably one of the only voices. How are you feeling right now, Ron?
Man, and first off, you know, I love what everyone had to say, and I, yeah, you know, me and some of my peers were just talking after the Atlanta. I just was speechless. I was sad. Like, you know, I couldn't even. It was beyond even posting about it or talk. Like, I just, you know, we all kind of shut down, and because every time you feel like, sorry about that. Every time, because there's, you know, a lot of our peers are doing great things and really reaching out and speaking out and stuff. And like every time we feel like there's something that's really positive, and then there's another case, another incident, and another. I mean, literally right after, it's the Boulder thing, right? So, and for me, I feel like, you know, a lot of the conversations, like, you know, have been about like, and you know, I'm at fault for it too. It's you know, like, since our ex-president got into office, we feel like this nation has gone backwards, you know, but it hasn't. It's there. It's been there. And we've just been fortunate enough to live in, you know, more progressive cities, maybe more metropolitan areas. But a lot of my friends in the Deep South, they still experience a lot of that stuff. And because, you know, we get caught up in our daily stuff, career, that kind of thing. So when Trump got elected and all this stuff starts happening, it's like, yeah, I'm embarrassed for saying, oh, it just felt like we're going backwards. No, it's always been there. Or else, how else would 73 million people vote for a guy like this? So for me, how do we address all this stuff, right? And I think there's a long term and more of a short term. The long term is education. The long term is, you know, show our kids the appropriate history, because a lot of, for me, I grew up not knowing about the Japanese internment camps. It's never taught to me. You know, it was I said this before, people were shocked, but like, I had history classes where they would say, oh yes, and the America were really great for the Chinese because they offered railroad jobs and all that stuff. And, you know, and it's just like, they never taught about the Chinese Exclusion Act. They never talked about like all these other instances where, you know, where it was very similar instances to, you know, our Black brothers and sisters with lynchings and just unfair, no trial, you know. So for me, yeah, the last year and last couple of weeks, you know, because for me, it's everything. And it's not just about us as Asian, you know, oh, we got to strive, Asian community and all that stuff. It is that. And I'm really proud. I'm very hopeful of our youth. But what this is everything from the past and the history of America. And it's like, and for us, for our POC brothers and sisters, we have to keep educating, even within our own families, our own friends. And it's just, for me, it's just really, I'm sad. I'm sad because this stuff is here, it's happening. And I feel like when I grew up, I grew up in fights all the time as a kid. You know, I'm not older than most of the guys here, but it's just sad, you know, feeling that you get past a stage, but it's not really where you think you are, you know, where you think your nation's are at this time. So for me, going back to the two ways, the long ways education, right? And for me, we got to reinforce that. But now the quicker way is like, we have a lot of our sports and entertainment entities, and we need more, our especially not just us, but our peers, our Black and brown peers on their big platforms. And they've said certain things like, our hearts with the Asian community, and for me, I take that as, but it's just like what the Black community used to say about the white community. It's like, oh, our hearts and prayers are over there. Like, it's not about that anymore. It's about action, and it's about speaking out, and it's about having our brothers and sisters, even the ones that don't think we have platforms, then, some of our peers that have great platforms. It's fine. It's what we can do individually, with our friends, with our own, smaller platforms, whatever it is. Like, every little thing matters. But anyways, I'm sorry if I'm taking too much.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
So this is a really strange moment, because in as much as this is the worst of times, we know the violence, and it didn't start with the massacre in Atlanta. It's been going on for some time. It's the worst of times, but strangely, in the entertainment industry, when you look at award seasons, when you look at the number of parts for Asians in major productions, it seems to be having a moment. Is it? And everybody who's on the stage right now, you're the successful ones. You have somehow broken in. You've somehow kicked those doors down. You've shown up. How real is this moment for you? Is this really a moment?
Well, I'm glad that Ron could speak to this, because he, I think one good thing that came out of this is that everyone's learning a lot. This is a continuous teaching moment, and people like Ron and people like Taima that came before us, whenever we feel like we're just alone in this moment, we can just look at our elders, our peers, the people, the giants that we're standing on the shoulders on. They came before us and they did their activism. There weren't many people then. There weren't many Asians in the country, just because of the Asian Exclusion Act, immigration laws, unfair treatment. And this is not just starting from that act. This stems back to the 1800s, when they were bringing coolies in replacement for slavery. It goes side by side, but we're not alone in this moment. And this moment won't be finished now. It's just a continuous fight. I think it was Jesus that said this, and forgive me if I'm quoting Jesus wrong, but I think, we're taking on this work, and to work on it, that's the job. But it's not our work to finish the job, because in my mind, the job will never be finished. So that's what this moment means, is just to use whatever we can, like Ron had said, to keep the conversation going. And it's not to be shy anymore, because we've done enough of that. We had to keep ourselves back because the previous generation had to build stability in order for us to be safe enough to actually speak out. And we never felt that sense of safety. But now it's time to test the waters. I've said this before. We got invited to the party late, but we're here now, and we got to party loud.
So do you feel like there's still barriers standing in your way, Ludi, when you think about your future career trajectory in this business? And this goes for everybody, Have things really gotten out of your way? Is this moment real?
Look, I'll just say there will always be barriers, but barriers are meant to be brought down. And I think the biggest barrier is yourself. The biggest barrier is to be able to take ownership of yourself, and to take ownership of your fear, and not to add upon that fear to make it into hate. I think that's what love is. And I think these feelings, these racism and the hate, the fear, the prejudice, it triggers something deep inside. It's like this instinctual fear that we have of the unknown. We have to broaden our in-group. We have to have a new worldview of what our in-group is and what others is. The in-group is the world. If we can do that, that's the eventual goal, but who knows when to reach that. It's something that's so innate, like music. You know, Megan's a singer, a musician. I like to hear more. There's a lot, I feel like, Peter, this is a great conversation, but there's a lot lacking. I want to hear more women talking about this. I want to tap into that feminine and bring balance to the world. Also, I want a discourse and even hear from people that have a different opinion. Why? People that actually hate us. We need to create discourse and not just discuss, not just chant to the choir, because we all feel the same thing. We need to know what the other people feel and empathize and be able to understand. So anyways, I'm talking a lot.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what Megan thinks.
No, please don't ever think that you're talking too much. Your words and your voice is so important. You've brought so much insight. And honestly, thank you for also highlighting the importance of the voices of Asian women, especially after the most recent massacre. It took me a while. It took a lot of thinking and a lot of emotions to kind of just process everything that's been happening. And it's already been a lot. But it's I don't even know how to put it into words. Like, honestly, I think it really just starts with media, because everyone watches TV, everyone watches movies and listens to music, and media influences us in such a powerful way. And especially when it comes to communities and areas, parts of the US that aren't really exposed to different cultures and different kinds of people, the people that don't really look like a white person. And so, especially as women, Asian women, we're so overly sexualized, treated as items. There's so many times I just try to erase from my memory where I'm just like walking down the street and some random person would just come up to me and say like, oh, ni hao, or konnichiwa, you want to go somewhere together? And it's just, and I just don't allow it. I just, not that I allow it. It's just, I just ignore and I walk away, but I've never felt that I was safe enough to say anything, because again, it's just been so deeply rooted in me to not say anything because I didn't want to cause trouble. And there are many times, like even in acting classes, I remember like growing up in a youth acting class, there was a time we were practicing accents, and other kids in my class were doing like a Southern accent or a British accent. And the only accent that I knew how to do really well was like a Korean accent that I always hear from my grandma. It's okay for me to do. I'm Korean, you know, and I know how to do it so well. Like I watch so many Korean dramas, like all the family members that have broken English, I'm able to just replicate it and embrace it and just have fun with this accent that I know how to do. And it was, for some reason, so fascinating for, especially being the only token Asian in that acting class. It was so fascinating to the other kids. And they started like mocking me. They started mocking this accent. They were like, oh, what is this new accent that we don't know how to do? And they just tried to copy me. And in that moment, I remember just feeling very offended and confused. But I didn't want to be the person to be like, hey, that's racist. Don't do that. Like, it's okay that you're doing it. And so, yeah, I just wanted to like share that story because I I have all these memories. I grew up thinking I never experienced racism. But I did. And all of these hate crimes that are not seen as hate crimes, it's so painful and frustrating that the media just they're so passive to the Asian American community, thinking that they're gaslighting us and making us feel like all these problems aren't real. And as a person that has really been easily gaslit for a lot of my life, it's like the fire inside of me that I didn't realize I had. And I really encourage not just Asian women, but just everyone in general to just kind of reflect. It's a time to reflect and look back into your past and kind of confront issues, and don't let others gaslight you when there's actually an issue. I'm sorry, I'm like starting to feel emotional. But yeah.
No, Megan, just let me ask you this moment, like how can you are, unfortunately, Juju Chan, we're going to hear from her by video. She had a earlier than expected production call, so she was expecting to join us. So you've become unfortunately the only Asian woman here. So how can people really hear and support Asian women this very moment right now?
Like I said earlier, I really feel like right now is the time to tap into your compassion, like tap into your feminine energy. Everyone has a mix of masculine and feminine energy. Right now is tap into that compassion, into your human side, your emotions, and to really just listen, open your heart. And just like how I had like a huge wake-up call during during the whole light of the Black Lives Matter movement, I reached out to my Black friends and just tried to hear out their stories and really just kind of be into their world a bit, just to understand and to educate myself and to educate my family members. And I honestly just encourage others to do the same, to open their hearts, and because that's honestly what we really need right now is just some compassion. I think that is definitely one of the most powerful and hopefully the most easiest things. So maybe it's not easy for some people, but and of course, besides that, like reach out to people on social media. I mean, it is a window to communicate with people outside in the world. So.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Can I call the switchboard and we can run the tape that Juju's prepared for us?
Yes.
Thank you for having me on your panel. And I'm so sorry I couldn't join you all. I've lived in the US since I was 5. But as much as I love America, I've always felt a kind of aggression against me for my look, which I couldn't understand when I was a kid. Of course, I recognize what it is now. It's racism. It comes from a combination of narrow-mindedness and fear. This fear has led to the weakest of our community being targeted and attacked. On top of the right laws and policing, the problem can also be lessened through education. The difficulty nowadays, though, is people choose to get their information from places they only agree with. So people with racist views tend not to get to hear our voice. In this regard, I strongly feel that it's up to people like us in media to try to reach across platforms through stories, words, or imagery in whatever genre of media, to try to shift people's perception on Asians in general. People need to learn to see the Asian community not as them, but as us.
Thank you. Thank you, Juju, for sharing. We wish you were here and part of this physical conversation. Of course, Juju is the very prominent person in the creative community from Wu Assassins and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. We're part of this very special industry, and we talked a little bit about the moment. I wanted to hear Ron and Osric, how you guys would respond to that. How real is this moment?
Yeah, I kind of want
in terms of opportunity.
Kind of want to touch on a couple of things that you guys all mentioned about Ludi and Megan, Peter, your original question. But for as far as this moment, yes, it's polarizing because, you know, unfortunately, aside from the atrocities that led to this, you know, we are binding as far as the Asian communities, whether you're Asian American, Asian Canadian, whereas there was a lot of player hating before, and just you know, I mean, we all know. You know, that we have it in our own families. I mean, my grandfather from my dad's side was very racist. I didn't know what racism was until I brought home my black friend as a kid and my Japanese friend as a kid. I got the crap beat out of me by my grandfather. So, you know, that's when I found out what that was. But we have to, for me, I think, there's so many avenues and there's so many stuff, like just with the women that were killed in Atlanta, and the fact that they said, you know, it's not a hate crime, it's sexual. And it's just like, that's part of the MFN problem, man, because it's part of the whole objectifying Asian women and stuff. Like, I have a dear friend, Olivia Chang, who recently posted on some stuff and we talked about it. And, you know, she was my castmate on Marco Polo. She's doing a great job on Warrior. And she's going to be on C. But it was just like, for us, we were talking and she was speaking out about all this stuff. And then there's still like some white male, you know, fans that just are not reading the environment in the room and just saying, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Can I just take you out, you know, for dinner? It's just like totally disconnected. And that's part of the problem. And so for my, you know, Asian sisters, check that. You know, because for me, I can't tell you all the times that I wish I could have spoken out through my career when I was really young. And I'm not going to name any names, but these are actors, executives where I worked with, and they thought we were bonded enough so that they can tell me like, oh God, Ron, I got to tell you, I love Asian women. Oh my God. And when they get in those little schoolgirl outfits, and I'm just like, And like, for me, that's part of the problem. We have to check it. You know, and going back to what, you know, Peter, your you know, question was, like, for me, it's like we have to check ourselves, our own community. And, you know, I said this, you know, last night in another pod, but it's just like, for me, it's great that we have this bonding. Let's continue it even within our own communities, because for us, whether it was history or stuff, it's just so much player hating. We have to unite as one so that even other cultures can help us, which we need to get through this. We need our Black and brown communities to back us on this, and white communities. And for me, it's like, it's about us too. When we educate, we have to speak in layers and details. When we tell our friends, our Black friends, maybe it's not immediately just, hey, our hearts are with you. Maybe it's just, hey, can you guys put out some videos to the youth, to the Black and brown youth, and say, hey, guys, what are y'all thinking? Asian Americans, Asian Canadians have nothing to do with COVID. You know, or even with that said, even if there was Chinese nationals here, it would still be wrong to just beat and bash them. I mean, it's not their fault. We still don't have all the answers of the true origin of COVID, because that's been, you know, Corona's been testing for the last 30, 40 years, maybe longer, you know, it's like, you know, and it's known that most of the strain that's killing us in the US is from Europe. So for me, like, I just want people to educate themselves more, and we need to do that. We need to help, and we need to speak out. We need to be more detailed, because, you know, in our music entities, because, like, you know, a lot of the times we also have to be aware, like, we have to tell our families, hey, let's not get mad at the Black or the Hispanic community because they're seeing POC people participate in, you know, Asian hate crimes. There could be many different variants. I mean, one of them we all know, our ex-president. Okay. The other thing is just psychological problems. And then it's just, it could be the history of, let's say, back in the 92 riots of Koreans and Blacks. And that was also miscued because we had Korean elders that didn't really communicate, couldn't speak the language. So they would be suspicious because all they learned about Black communities is what they watch on TV and movies. So they're going to look and say, hey, are you taking anything? And that's going to reflect negatively on the Black community that their stories are in. So there's that history. We have to do our research and then attack it. And a lot of our Black brothers and sisters are standing up for us. Just like, I've been so proud, recently with, after Floyd was murdered, that the communities, all the POC communities came out and supported.
So sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Supported BLM and our Black communities. And like for that, we have to keep that synergy going, because part of, we can't just be like, oh yeah, Asian communities are ourselves. Like part of why we play or hate each other is national pride. National pride is great for the Olympics, right? But it's not good when it comes to things like this, because it just perpetuates different kinds of prejudice, even within
incredibly messy. I mean, it's really, really messy because it's the kind of, to really be able to look at it, you have to be able to splice hairs almost.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to walk and chew gum. You have to have a cultural nuance that's very, very hard to achieve.
I'm going to attack the elephant in the room right now. All of us. I have, like, for me, some of my closest friends are Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, whatever, but we all speak. And we all heard these conversations from my racist grandfather. Chinese are number one, Japanese are number one, Koreans are number one, blah, 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 blah. We got to take that out, man. We are the next. And that's why I have hope in the youth, because when I went to the protest, there was so much of our youth out there, Asian, brown, white, everything. When the 2 riots, there was no one. There was a couple of white people and me. All right. I felt like I was, and then it's just like, so that's a huge difference already. But right now we just got to come together in true solidarity. So then we can come together with other, brothers and sisters in true solidarity. That's how we tackle this and show America that it's yellow, brown, Black and white, not just white, not just, because all these things that are happening come from white suppression, white racism, it's all that shit. So for me, it's like, we're not going to beat this by being in our own thing. We have to come together. We have to reach out to other peeps to help us.
I have a 12-year-old daughter, so I get to occasionally see the world through her eyes, from the perspective of the next generation. And her comeback to me is always, Dad, or she calls me Baba, can you guys just solve the problems and stop telling me to solve it? Because when you guys get your act together so that we can step into a better world instead of kicking the ball and saying, guys, make it better. Osric, give us something. You've been gestating. You're so.
I enjoy listening. Everyone has a lot of wonderful things to say. I think I came in somewhere between Ron's generation and the new generation, but I definitely saw the infighting. I saw our community, so segregated within itself. And it was so heartwarming when I saw the change of, before we were looking at all the things that made us different. And now we're looking at all the things that make us similar. Like, we are one big community. We have to fight for each other. And to your question on do I see this as an opportunity? I am forever, like, if I'm good at one thing, it's seeing the silver lining in things. That is pretty much what I've made it my job to be. So yes, I absolutely see things, I'm an opportunist in that sense. I feel like anyone, no matter who you are, what kind of minority you are, even if, you're a straight white male, like, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. If we focus on the disadvantages, the negatives, like, you're going to be paralyzed to inaction. I think that motivation and just finding a reason to do something is so hard. Like, inspirational, motivational industry, that's like a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason, right? So here we have a crisis going on. If you ever felt like you lacked a purpose, you got one right here. We have a reason to do stuff. We have a reason to tell our stories, right? And if I've heard from my straight white friends who like, man, like there's all this affirmative action going on. Like I can't get a meeting because I'm not a POC or whatever. Well, use the skills that you have, partner with a POC and someone if you want to go through those programs and help them out, right? Like let's just use these opportunities because there's a lot of programs that are seeking for diverse voices because we're tired of watching that same movie over and over again because we've seen like several iterations of the same one, right? We're ready for new voices to be heard, right? So I think there's plenty of opportunities. This is why I started directing. I started writing because I'm tired of just being, to fill in a slot that could be taken from another Asian actor. I don't feel like I need to be that person anymore. In fact, I try to mentor as many people as I can. And now that I'm in the writing, directing, producing space, I want to create roles. I want to tell our stories. I want to find the next generation of storytellers. Ron is doing the same thing. He's helped me out plenty. And I think we're all doing the same thing. When I see someone like Ludi, like I will say, looking at Ludi, 10 years ago, if I saw Ludi, I'd be like, man, this guy is bad news. He's competition. But now I don't see that anymore. I see Ludi as a friend for one, but two, I see if Ludi makes it, if he does even bigger and better things, you know what that's going to do? That's going to create more jobs for our community. Because guess what? People are going to be related to characters that Ludi plays, and that will be a whole family in essence. Ludi will be able to start his own production company at some point. He'll get to tell his own stories, and I would think that they would involve POC characters. So I think for all of us, we need all of us to do well so that we can all be pillars, and then, the structure, the building, the whatever just grows and grows because we have the talent pool to support it. Like on the casting side, if you have 10 amazing actors for one role, well, you'll be like, wow, this is an embarrassment of riches. I just need to write more characters because we have so many talented people in this pool of actors that we just need more of those characters. Like hearing conversations of like, oh yeah, like even from my own stuff, I'm like, man, I want to write like a 80-year-old, Asian woman actor in Vancouver. And I'm like, okay, who do I know that I could actually cast that? And it's like maybe one or two people. And then I actually have to start asking my family friends, like Mom, do you know anyone that would actually be okay being in front of camera? And none of them are. So like, we just have to grow our talent pool in front of the camera, behind the camera, so that our stories get told and we are seen and we are represented. And I think that now is the time. And again, it comes back to like, what is your purpose? So many people that I meet don't have a purpose in life, and it's a hard thing to find. Granted, we have one here. This is a really, really solid one. So if you are at all moved at what is happening in the world right now in America, like make this your purpose. We have a fight. We have something to do. So make this a purpose. Tell your stories and let's.
Look, it's a pretty awesome purpose, and it's a fun, dynamic, engaging, wildly worthwhile. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I just want to give a shout out to our listeners and just kind of reflect some of the messages that I'm coming through. We're getting a lot of love for people. Megan, some folks are saying they're really feeling your pain. So, your truth really spoke out. From Summer Sock, it really talks about being misidentified. I think we get this a lot too, just because one of the aspects of being so underrepresented is that whatever you see out there has to represent everybody, which is impossible. When you think about Asians really coming from so many different parts of Asia and having such socioeconomic and cultural diversity, even within the Asian community, that representation is kind of a complicated thing, requires a lot of understanding and outreach. So it's Summersock, I understand your frustration, and even in this panel that we felt it. Are there enough South Asians? Are there Southeast Asians? Are there enough women? Because when you really are committed to representation, it really opens it up. And when you just have to do things in 30 minutes or in 90 minutes or 2 hours, it really speaks, in my view, we need just more opportunities and more vehicles So Summer Sock, I think we're all working on it in our own way. And Susan wanted to know the diversity of people, where y'all come from. So if you want to share a little bit about that when we get into, earlier, Ludi, I said I want to put a pin into the love, the Asian love. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So everybody, what are the loves that you're leaning into? I think, Osric, you kind of did this really well because you talked about this moment, needing a cause and standing up. Is like, everybody, we have an amazing opportunity, because what we do as storytellers or people who enable stories, we could create change at scale. I come from the world of politics, and the reason I left politics is because I don't believe in legislating behavior. I think people change when they have an emotional experience. When they choose to open themselves up, you don't berate or beat somebody. You don't beat the hate out of somebody. You love them. You show them. You allow them a vulnerable experience. So, what are the loves that you're leaning into? You are the tip of the spear. You guys are all creative powerhouses. What are you leaning into? What are the positive changes you want to see in the world? And let's just end on that note.
Okay, personally, I'm loving everybody here. I like the dialectic. I like the discourse. I love hearing from people, and I like to hear my opinions bounce back at me, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. I love to learn. I think the best outcome of a discussion is two smarter people, right? And we got a lot of smarter people here in the room. From Megan, I completely want to hear more from the feminine side. I do want people to recognize, I want to recognize in myself the masculinity and the femininity. We spoke about this before, Peter, about masculinity and Asian representation, masculinity. I think we need to talk about Asian representation and how to balance the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, and stop.
And right here.
That's right, man. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Stop. I mean, I've had so many Asian dudes come up to me and go, I hate it. They think my dick is so small. And I go, bro, man, I outgrew my dick 15 years ago. You're still carrying it around with you. It's time to move on. You know what I mean? Just be yourself, man. We're getting that. You're masculine, you're feminine. It's the masculinity we have in the world hasn't brought. We got to ask ourselves, why? Think about this. Why are all these attackers that we've seen male? Why are they all male? Beyond that, why are a lot of them other marginalized people? It's the fear. We got to start empathizing with those people. It's not the person's fault. It's the system we got to correct. And to correct the system, it's like what Osric said. This is a moment where we destroy that old belief that if you're the first, if you're the nail that sticks out the most, you're going to get hammered. If you're the weed that grows the tallest, you're going to get cut. The antidote to that is have everybody grow taller and everybody rise up so they can't cut anyone. This is the moment when the civil rights movement was at its highest in the 70s, and they achieved something. It wasn't just because of Malcolm X or MLK. It was because they had support. They had everyone there behind them, backing them up, right? And they had a voice to speak, and they spoke out. And also, I love what Ron said about recognizing that we have all that with us. I heard an Auschwitz survivor say that we all have a little bit of Hitler inside of us. Now that's a fucking scary thought to think, but we have to recognize that we're all a little bit racist.
That's a truth, Ludi. So there's a lot to love there. So I just want to go on because we're down to 4 minutes, everybody. So please, Ron, what would you say? What are you loving? What are nuggets to move forward with and build positivity around?
Yeah, I'll speak on two quick things. One, Peter, it's this, like, look, Ludi, Osric, Megan, we all have our individual lanes that we can strive to work on. It's like what Ludi spoke on earlier. Like we can't really, it's too big of a thing for an individual to fix, right? But we can all do what we can in our individual lanes. And then when there comes to a situation where all of us can bind together and outside entities too, that's when it's special. This is one of those moments. Peter, you put this together. I love hearing what everyone has to say, and hopefully all of us and what we have to say together will inspire other peers, you know. And yeah, so that's one thing we gotta keep the talks and the conversation going. Second thing, I'm working on a film right now that it's been pushed back 3 times because of COVID. And I would say the positive thing is that, you know, some of the stuff that I've been suggesting and it's about, and they've been behind it, like Universal, the execs at Universal. And to me, I just want to say, like, hey, they're behind like POC, like us going to more of a POC cast, and also they took recommendations. I gave them like a list of Asian casting directors that I really, really liked, and they hired one of them. And like, for me, it's like, I was thinking there was going to be a battle on certain things, but then no, it's like, so for us, we just got to keep trying. And Ludi and Osric, they're going to have their projects, and Megan too. And it's just like, and all our peers, and I think as long as we just keep trying, and you're right, there is underrepresentation, especially with Southeast Asians. And for us, I thought Raya was a beautiful film. I thought it was a really fun film. And, there was some stuff behind it because, there isn't Southeast Asian actors. And for me, I understand that, but then that's a whole nother conversation between.
It's a tough business, but it's still progress. Progress is messy.
It's major.
It's incredibly messy. Yeah,
it's major progress to see another culture and all this stuff, right? Yep. So then we have to just be mindful of the business, and there's certain people, certain celebrities that might attract people in more seats. But the big picture is that Disney, after Mulan, did Raya.
Look, you know what? I don't care what everybody else says. They're to be respected, encouraged, and I want them to keep going.
Yeah.
Honestly. Megan, what are you loving? What do you want to, what positivity do you want to share and shine a light on?
I just want to echo what everyone else was saying. You guys really just brought so much light into this conversation, and I'm learning so much, and you guys are just so well-spoken and so inspiring. So thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for having me be a part of this. But
thank you, everybody. We are straight out of time. Osric, I'm sorry, but you kind of got your love in already. So again, thank you all. This is not the only time we'll be doing this in partnership with Wizard World. We actually have a whole line of more detailed discussions. So just consider this the beginning. And I want to thank Wizard World and all of you for joining for this conversation today. This is just the beginning. Expect to see lots of activity from everybody on the stage. Love and respect to all of you. Take care and be safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rock on, Megan.